The season in review, we look back at the 2024 LSU Tigers here on the Hannycast.
The Hannycast, a weekly LSU football film study with Charles Hannegriff and former LSU tight end Richard Dixon. Now to break down the Tiger tape, here's Charles and Richard.
Thanks everybody for joining us here on the Hannycast. I'm Charles Hannegriff, along with former Tiger Richard Dixon. And tonight we're going to take a look back at our preseason look at the LSU Tigers, see what we got right, see what we got wrong, and how our views of the team and the program are different now than they were right before we left for Las Vegas. You get to see this wonderful backdrop when we recorded this in August. We were getting ready to leave for Vegas, and everybody was real optimistic, and everything was great. Season had some ups and downs. Richard, we're going to take a look back at some of the things we thought before the season. Some of them panned out exactly like we thought. Some of them not so much. But, you know, LSU's win total was about 8.5 to 9, so it was pretty close to that. We talked in this video. I'm not going to show it, but we talked about, hey, they really need to win this game. You know, they've lost 4 openers in a row. Well, they made it 5. Yeah. We know that. We talked about how the FPI had them predicted to lose to Ole Miss, which they won, A&M, which they lost, and Alabama, which they lost. And we thought that the Oklahoma game would be a real important game, whereas their postseason life was concerned. All right, so they beat Ole Miss. That didn't come out right. They lost to A&M. They lost to Alabama. That came out right. And then the Oklahoma game, Oklahoma wasn't nearly as good as we thought that they would be. And Florida was a little bit better by the time LSU actually got to play them. If they played them in September, that would have been different. So, you know, overall, how do you feel? You've had a week or so to digest this.
Well, you know, you always get so entrenched into the season, and you know, you're thinking about every single game, and your hopes either get higher and your expectations get higher. But when it levels back down, I think, you know, you can go back and look. I always thought it was a 9, close to around a 9-win season. So, you know, looking back at the whole thing, it panned out how we thought we did. The wins weren't the wins we thought we had. Some of the losses weren't the losses we thought we were going to have. But it was a team that we knew was going to be on the verge of something and just had to get over a hump. You
know, the title of it was Key Position Battles. Can Brian Kelly lead the Tigers to the CFP? Well, they didn't make the CFP. If they had won one more game against Florida, they would have made the Southeastern Conference Championship game, and who knows what would have happened there. So it was a season that had a lot of twists and turns to it. Let's start with where we were at that time, which was Garrett Nussmeier. And the biggest question going in to the season where Nussmeier was concerned. The question has always been with Nussmeier, are you a little bit too
he's been labeled the gunslinger type guy. The guy that likes to throw the ball around, take chances, and look, players love it. But like, I think Brian Kelly gave a great analogy the other day. He said, you know, in the past, he wasn't driving his car. It was a rental car. He was going to go full speed, you know, hit the bank, go as fast as he could. Now it's, you know, his team, his car. He realized that he can't take all the chances. You still got to have a guy, you know, take shots, but not as often as he was.
That's the balance, Rich. And how do you get to that? Because I don't want to take the gunslinger out of him entirely.
Well, you talk about like Jaden Daniels. Brian Kelly, I can't remember, last year or the year before, said he hasn't thrown enough interceptions. He's not taking enough chances. And there's that fine balance of, you know, fitting that ball in a tight window and then saying, I can't get it there, throw the ball away. And it's just each guy's got to feel his way around and then get comfortable when he can take a shot and when he needs to get rid of the ball.
All right, so how did Nussmeier do, in your opinion, with that threading that fine balance?
He had really good moments, and then he had moments where what we were scared of. I mean, he ended up, I think, with 11 interceptions on the year. There were some really bad interceptions, and there were some really great throws. So it was kind of in between to, you know, I think he made better plays than we give him credit for, but the interceptions and the mistakes were still there.
The first 5 games, that's the non-conference schedule plus South Carolina, he had a very good run. He was 15 to 4 touchdowns to interceptions, 331 yards a game. Now, let's put that into context. 6 of the touchdowns were against Nicholls State. The interception, the one against USC, was a Hail Mary, so we're not going to count that one against him.
There was 2 overturned against South Carolina.
Yeah, and I think one of them was the ticky-tack on the illegal block. I'm going to say I'm not going to blame him for the horse collar. Okay, that was a legitimate penalty. The other one was not. So that's about right, probably 15 to 4. Then you take the 2 different halves against Ole Miss. First half, not good. Really, third quarter, it's kind of so-so. Fourth quarter, he was great. Kind of a a block game against Arkansas by his standards, no touchdowns, interceptions. They moved the ball a lot. They had problems in the red zone.
Yeah.
Then the two bad games, the second half against A&M and the whole game against Alabama. Then the last 3 games, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, 290 yards a game. Really sort of got into a rhythm there, and I thought he was playing his best football towards the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that's with play calling that helped him out. I mean, you go look at those last couple of games, we were running, 28, 30 times a game. We really started playing more balanced. They relied on the run game. They took the pressure off of him, and he finished the season on a high note.
3,739 yards, 26 touchdowns, 11 interceptions for Garrett Nussmeier, who's still deciding whether he's going to come back to LSU for another year. Jalen Milroe pulled his name out of the draft earlier this week. That would conceivably move Nussmeier up at least one spot. Most people had Milroe in front of him. I wouldn't have, but most people did. So we'll see. He's got a decision to make. Portal just opened as we're recording this on Tuesday. What's today? Today's the 10th? The 10th, December the 10th. So we'll see. I thought he had a good year. There was some hits and misses for sure.
He showed some great things he can do and some elite things that a lot of quarterbacks can't do. They still want to see the maturity of not making the dumb throws, not making the throws that you don't have to make. But I think the biggest part of his decision, we all know he's going to be an educated decision with his dad.
Yeah.
But he's got to know who's coming back with him. I mean, what guys are going to be there to block? What guys are going to be there to throw to? Can he have a better year than he had this year?
We know that Campbell is leaving. We know that Taylor is leaving. We believe that Jones will probably go, and then we got to see who comes in the transfer portal in the next week.
And the guy we were high on, with Taylor leaving, Pimpton's now in the transfer portal,
and so is C.J. Daniels.
Yeah.
So we got to see what comes in on the other side of that. We're brought to you by Marucci Sports, MarucciSports.com. The new Hitter's House, newest facility is in Metairie on Airline Drive, 1801 Airline Drive, the Hitter's House at 5801 Segan Lane. You get into the Hitter's House, members access 24/7 to the members-only cages, bullpen cages, reservations, opportunities are prioritized. 15% retail store discount, plus you got family plans that are available. All of Marucci aluminum and composite bats are available at the Hitter's House. Founded and operated by current and former big leaguers, it's Marucci Sports. Go to MarucciSports.com. Probably the biggest surprise of the year was the play of the offensive line. Here's what we thought going into the season. One of the best returning offensive lines that we've seen in recent memory at LSU. Will Campbell at left tackle is going to be a first-round pick. Emory Jones at right tackle is going to be a first-round pick. Garrett Dellinger at left guard, and Miles Frazier at right guard. Those 4 guys have combined to play 128 games in college and start 110. Rich, that's a lot, man.
No doubt. I mean, every time, I think my biggest question going into every year is you're usually replacing a tackle. You're either replacing a center, you're replacing a guard. And that's the hardest part of the offense to gel together. Those guys are making calls, they're making combination blocks, they're reading the blitzes. And for me, when I talk to anybody about football right now, I feel the reason I'm most confident is because you have that unit coming back.
We missed.
They
were not
really well.
We had the part about the starts and all that. We felt confident in it, and they simply did not have the type of year that we thought that they would. Now, Will Campbell did finish first team All SEC. Emory Jones did finish second team All SEC. That came out today. But LSU finished last in the SEC in rushing. They were 107th in the nation at 116 yards per game. By the way, it's 13 yards behind Georgia, who also could not run the ball this year. So this is not, something unique to LSU. They did finish first in the league in sacks allowed. They only allowed 15 sacks for the season. But I think overall, Rich, the offensive line was a disappointment.
No, yeah. I mean, you had, what game was it? Was it Alabama? You gave up 6 sacks?
Yeah.
I mean, you really, for the most part of the season, you gave up 2 sacks. And then towards the end of the season, you got an SEC play. You went against some more elite defensive linemen. They got after him. You had a few injuries. But, yeah, no, it's definitely a disappointment because this is a group that we were all hyped up about. I mean, I think we went into doing that show after I watched Will Campbell's interview before the game talking about we're going to run it. We don't care. We'll let you know.
We believed.
And I believed every bit of it. I mean, those guys were in a position to do great things in the run game. It didn't pan out. It's something we missed, and I think a big part of that was because we hadn't seen a traditional run game in a long time. They ran a lot with Jaden Daniels, completely different. It's not your traditional run game with a running back, and I think that we were a little bit overhyped on that.
I think there were, some injuries. Obviously, Dellinger missed some games at the end of the season. I think Jones was playing. He got rolled up in the UCLA game, and I don't know if he ever completely felt 100% after that. But they just simply did not run the football nearly as well as we thought they would. I would label as the biggest surprise of the season because we weren't the only two that thought that.
No, let's talk about it. I mean, we weren't right on the running backs either. You start with Josh
I'll
Williams.
get to that. we weren't right on some things. I promise you. But
I mean, the guy that showed up and the guy that gave us the biggest spark is the guy we didn't mention.
Yeah, we thought that they would go with the experienced backs. But before we get to that, I want to get to the tight ends. We talked about Mason Taylor before the season, what kind of role he would play in this offense. And this is your corner of the store, having played the position. Mason Taylor, another guy who's going to hear his name called very early next spring in the draft. And I bring up the draft stuff just so you kind of get an idea
What people think of them.
Yes, where their reputations are and their skill level. Taylor will live in LSU lore for the touchdown against Alabama as a freshman, but he's really grown as a player too.
Yeah, he's a guy that's put on a good bit of weight. I saw him walking around the weight room. I think they got him listed at 255. He's got your prototypical NFL frame. He's a guy that I was telling you early on, he was a C+ blocker, but was a great athlete in the pass game. I think he's elevated that to where he's going to be a BB+ blocker, a guy that can, you can run behind instead of run on the backside of. And you're going to need that because I think behind that, Pimpton's a guy that is a great receiver. We haven't asked him a lot to block. Green, he's a wide receiver. I went to 3 Zachary games last year, and he lined out wide and ran go routes every play.
Okay.
I'm right 100% of the time.
You ain't missed a lick in this one. This was perfect, okay? Taylor finished with 55 catches for 546 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was named third-team All-SEC today. He had more catches than either of the guys that finished in front of him. And I think you're dead on. They did start to run behind him.
Yeah.
How many times did we sit here and run tight end with a wing, and he was one or the other, and LSU ran behind him a lot this year?
He's a guy that, I would grade him the same way I thought he was. He's a B++ blocker. I think he was even more elite on the outside blocking game than I really thought, blocking in space, being that slot receiver and getting out on a cornerback or a safety. But, if you go back and watch our last film review, some of the best runs were behind Taylor, and it's something that he really improved himself on.
I agree. You also had Pimpton completely correct. You said, hey, look, the guy's a receiver. He hasn't really been a blocker. And he started to come on. He had a couple of catches in the last game. I was frankly disappointed to see him in the transfer portal because I thought, they just don't have very many tight ends right now. They got a freshman coming in. Taylor's declared for the draft, and I do believe he'll still be a second-round pick next spring. So he did good. And Trey Green was a receiver. They took him 7 weeks or so to do that, but he was a receiver. So you get a gold star.
You can trust me when we talk tight ends.
You got it. Dependable storage with 8 locations across Louisiana and 1 in Gulfport, Mississippi, with new facilities in Slidell and Youngsville. They'll match any competitor's pricing, offer convenient online rentals and payments, and offer free use of the moving truck for new rental move-ins. Clean, secure, and conveniently located. Their facilities, you can check out the website at dependablestorage.com for locations, pricing, and rentals. Like Skip Bertman says, Dependable Storage, we want your stuff. All right, this was our take on the running backs. Josh Williams to lead the team in carries and Caleb Jackson to lead the team in yards. I think that Williams probably will play a little bit more than him, especially at the beginning of the season. But that I almost equate it to what happened in 2003 season, where at the beginning of the season it was more kind of a Chiron Carey, and at the end of the season it was more Justin Vincent. All right, missed on this. Caleb Durham led the team in carries and rushes. This segment goes on for a little bit, but we never got to him. Now, in our defense, we did spend some time talking about John Emery, who got off to a terrific start and then hurt himself in practice, and that was the end of that. I think the biggest surprises here were that Durham really emerged and that Jackson didn't. We thought and again, we weren't the only ones. That he was going to be a real factor in the run game, and he really wasn't. Yeah,
but I don't think, you go back and look at the first few games. John Emery had a couple big plays in the second half of the USC game, but there weren't a lot of great spots for them to run behind. We talk about what we thought the running backs were going to do. We just got done telling you that, we were wrong on the offensive linemen. They were not very good at run blocking. And I think it took a while for them to mold what they were going to do. They started zone blocking, and it was going to be a guy that was different than the mold we came from. Caden Durham was a fast guy, a quick guy, a guy that can make a cut, make a guy move. Where we were thinking we had this big road grading offensive line that Caleb Jackson was going to be a one cut and run down the throat.
So we missed a little bit, but there was some good there that came out of it. I think going into next season, Durham will be one of the players that we talk about the most. Really emerged as a freshman. We also talked about Blake Baker in his first season as defensive coordinator. This is what we thought before the season started about Blake Baker.
Not so much schematically. I think it's the buy-in. I never saw players high-fiving Matt House, jumping up on him. I didn't see Matt House get excited. The players get around him. Go watch any clip that LSU puts out. Baker's all over the field. The guys speak glowingly about him. I mean, I think Perkins had an interview the other day that just talked about how much he meant to him, the way that he was getting involved in every day at practice. And, what we talked about earlier is not the latest Pliny, but the way Pliny was when I was there. He was that guy. Every player loved to be around him. He loved to blitz. He loved to make big plays, give guys opportunities to, make the stands, just go crazy. And everything I'm hearing is that's how Blake Baker wants to play.
This worked out. Now, not that this is one of the best LSU defenses of all time, but said, hey, we need him to get a little bit better. We need him to create a little bit more mayhem, havoc, whatever you want to say it. We want him to be enthusiastic. I think he did all of that. The scoring defense went down from 28 points a game to 23.4 points a game. What do we say? Just get a little bit better. He doesn't have the personnel right now to run everything he wants to run exactly how he wants to run it. So make progress. Okay, well, 4 points a game, 4.5 points a game. That's progress to me. The rush defense went from 161 a game to 146 a game. Again, a little bit of improvement. The biggest improvement, numbers may be a little bit skewed. I want to get your thoughts on this. The pass defense went from 256 yards a game to 205. They went from 13th in the league to 6th. Now, I know the safety play at times really kind of got screwy, but that's a big jump in the pass defense.
No, I think, Zy Alexander was there for pretty much a full season after he came back in week 2 or 3. If you go back and look at his PFF grades and his stats, it's pretty unbelievable. The year he had. I think we got more pressure on the quarterback. I don't know what our sack numbers were if you had that written down, but I think we hurried quarterbacks more. There was a couple big plays that hit people on, but there wasn't as many. I don't think there was as many misses. There were times where they just got beat and they got outran, but you just didn't see the complete coverage bust that we saw last year where everybody's looking around at each other with their hands up in the air. I think guys played more sound in their techniques. And then, like I said, I think there was a much more emphasis on the pass rush.
Got to give Corey Raymond a lot of credit here. Yeah. He came back. Those corners were better. The pass numbers, prove it. Now, at times they were really good in the pass game because they got beat in the run game. The second half at A&M, or against Alabama. Milroe didn't hurt him with his arm. He hurt him with his legs. So did Marcel Reed. So a couple of games there kind of got lost in the wash a little bit, but the pass defense was better by 50 yards a game. That's a significant move.
Well, the problem, the biggest difference for me is we just got drove down the field all the time last year. We either made a stop or they made a big play. There were some big plays this year, and that's where your yardage comes from. But for the most part, you would play 80% really good defense and then have a mistake.
We asked them to get better. They got better, right? And we're going to talk about some of the individual positions here in a minute. We're brought to you by Lake Urgent Care with 25 years of experience dedicated to providing quality care close to home. They treat minor illnesses and injuries for ages 3 months and up at 17 convenient locations in Baton Rouge, Hammond, Livingston, and Ascension parishes. Plus, they offer occupational health and weight loss solutions. As a seamless extension of Our Lady of the Lake, patients can access care from anywhere with the MyChart patient portal. Our urgent care centers are open 7 days a week. Simply walk in, check in online, or schedule a virtual care visit at lakeurgentcare.com. We spent a couple of segments talking about the defensive line. We started out with the interior of the defensive line, and one of the guys we were talking about here was Dominic McKinley. And then after that, the name I'm watching is Dominic McKinley, who terrific player, a huge recruit out of Lafayette. 6'6", about 315 pounds, and boy, the practices I've been to, Rich, he looks the part. I understand he's not ready to play every down right now, but that's what I'm starting with anyway on that interior. All right, now I cut out the part about Jacoby. We talked about Jacoby and Guillory. He went down early in the season, so we get an incomplete on that. He's coming back next year, which I think is a big deal. McKinley, it took him a little while. Got into the UCLA game a little bit, but he didn't really start to play a good bit until November. But the last couple of games, Rich, I thought he was really good. He had 6 tackles and 2 sacks. I thought going into next year, he's one of the guys I'll be really excited about. The guy we didn't talk about was Ahmad Bro, but we spent a lot of time during the season talking about him.
He was the first one that really stepped up to the plate. I think it was a USC game 1. He got on the field and played, had 13, 14 snaps. I mean, he got there faster than McKinley, the guy that we talked about right here. But both of them finished up well. I mean, the position I think I'm most excited about next year is having Guillory back, having McKinley rolling, having Bro rolling, and that becomes really the strength of our program and the strength of the season where it was kind of a big question going into the season.
We're brought to you by Bayou Apparel, helping local businesses communicate their message since 2009. One of only a few local LSU official licensees, Bayou Apparel offers the highest quality products to showcase your brand, whether you've got an established one or a new one. Bayou Apparel design experts help you create eye-catching designs that fit your company's message. They do logos, event T-shirts, and promotional items for your business. Call 225-928-9090 or go to the website at bayouapparel.com. The next segment that we get to, this is kind of bittersweet a little bit because we're going to talk about some guys that played really well this season. Unfortunately, they're not coming back. So we're talking about the edge rushers right now. Braden Swinson, Savion Jones, and a little bit of Deshaun Womack here.
Braden Swinson, who was really, I think, starting to come on at the end of last year, shows, another older guy, I think, has got a real I think he's got a real platform for his last year here to be a good pass rusher. And Savion Jones looks a little bit lighter to me. He made a couple of plays in the last practice that I went to, and one of the things we talked about Jones a lot last year. He played, he started, but he didn't make a lot of plays. That first burst step that he had in high school wasn't there. They missed a lot of edge sets, and he looks a little bit better now.
They let him play with bad technique last year. I mean, we talked about it week in, week out. He's lining up 2 yards off the ball, and that's when I talk about you get a Kevin Peoples, a Bo Davis in there. They're not letting that slide anymore. He's a guy that they know how to use him. They're going to make him, play with the correct technique, and he's got the physical ability. The one that I'm most excited about that flashed last year is Deshaun Womack.
Yeah.
He's a guy that, last year when you watched him play, he played at a different speed and a different level than the rest of them, but he needed to come along. And I think, with a full spring with Bo Davis, Kevin Peoples, those guys in that defensive line, I think by the end of the year he could be the guy we're talking about.
We got a lot of this right. Swinson, but look, I'm not going to blame you because I was right there with you with Womack. I'll get to him in a second. Swinson finished the season second-team All-SEC with 54 total tackles, 30 solos, and 8.5 sacks, which led the team. I thought he was terrific
he played
year.
Lights out this year.
And there was one play on the goal line that he makes where he wasn't just a pass rusher. He helped me out with the game. Was it Ole Miss? Where he just
there was one where he
stoned the
guy in the background. He had a bounce, and Weeks makes a tackle. Look, he did it all. Run game was great. Pass game was great. He was the electricity we needed on defense.
And I thought that Savion Jones had a really good year. 36 tackles, 18 solos, 4.5 sacks. He was second on the team in sacks. Rich, I thought he had a really good year. I thought he did play a little bit lighter. I thought the burst was back. So I thought he had a really strong campaign.
His technique was great. I mean, compared to what we were looking at the year before, he was a guy that understood his technique, played his technique, was very well coached, and we got to see with his ability and his athleticism that he was steered in the right direction, and it really showed.
Now we missed on Womack, but he played 4 games at the beginning of the season. You saw a flash here and a flash there, and then he disappeared in the second half of the season. Didn't make the trip to Florida and didn't play in the last 3 games of the season. And he's in the transfer portal now, so I don't know what happened there. I still think he's a tremendously talented kid. But what I saw to Swinson and Jones and what these coaches were able to get out of them, I'm excited about what they've got in place there. They got to replenish this position. They'll bring Gabe Relaford back, who'll probably open the spring at one of these defensive ends. I don't know who's on the other side right now. Might not be on the roster as we speak. So Peoples and Davis have got their work cut out for them, but I love the job that they did this year.
I know that when you talk about replacing them, and I think we're in a good spot if we got Peoples and we got Baker. I saw where a 5-star freshman out of Missouri is hitting the transfer portal today.
That they recruited.
And they recruited him, and you hope that it puts us in a good spot.
We're brought to you by Dana Brown, the law offices of O.C. Brown. Dana and his team of attorneys have helped us out many times, and they've carried on his father O.C.'s legacy for the last 30 years. So if you've been in a car accident, you have other legal needs, the law offices of O.C. Brown should be your first and only call. Truly your law firm for a lifetime. Call them at 225-343-1111. On the web, it's O.C. Brown, O-S-S-I-E, Brown.com. And right down the street from the law offices of O.C. Brown, Town Square Pizza, delicious homemade pizza made right in front of you. And always they're going to do this in a reasonable amount of time. If you're working downtown, you got a limited amount of time for lunch, head on down to Town Square Pizza, get the delicious square pizza right in front of you. Generous portions. You're going to be able to bring some back to the office, bring some back for lunch. Downtown Baton Rouge at Town Square Pizza. Last thing we're going to talk about here is special teams, and we'll talk about this here and see how we did.
Special teams, Damian Ramos. I've got a good deal of confidence in him. I feel good about an experienced kicker coming back. Xavier Thomas is going to upgrade the return game. The return game has basically been a hand in the air for the last 2 years, and I think that Xavier Thomas is going to improve that greatly. Last practice we went to, they were going live, except they weren't tackling to the ground. He caught punts in traffic, nothing hit the ground, everything moving forward.
It's been a while since we've been confident in fielding a punt.
It has. The punters are troubling right now because the consistency has not been there.
I'm just going to stop it right there because we got a good bit of this. Yeah, we got this right. Ramos was 22 of 27 this season. He had a long of 50, and he was 7 of 10 between 40 and 49 yards. Those are your money kicks.
Yeah.
I mean, the ones inside of 40 you're supposed to make. The ones outside of 50 at the college level, if you hit half of those, that's big. 40 to 49, that's the sweet spot. 7 out of 10 there, I thought was really good. And a couple of those were bad snaps.
I was about to say they were on the snapper. It wasn't necessarily him. It was either a bad snap, bad hold, but there were issues within the kicking game that weren't really necessarily on Ramos.
Xavier Thomas, third-team return specialist on the All-SEC team today. You need 1.2 returns per game to qualify for the SEC leaders. He did, and he came up just short of that. Only 10 teams out of the 16 had enough punt returns to qualify for this. The punters are so good now that returns are just not – you just don't see as many punt returns as you used to. But when he did, the average was 3.8 on 13 returns. That's not a ton. I thought his biggest contributions was that the punts didn't hit the ground and roll for 20 yards. Okay,
and that's hidden yardage you don't see.
Thank you. Yeah. Last year they had 74 yards in total returns, so on 7 returns.
Yeah.
So he doubled that number. And the other thing was he was second in the league in kickoff returns with just under a 24-yard average. LSU was second in the league in kickoff returns when you throw in Aaron Anderson's touchdown at the end of the season. So all of that was good. I thought Xavier Thomas was good. Thought Anderson was good. Thought Ramos was good. And I thought the punters struggled.
Which
they were last in the league in punting. I mean, the numbers are the numbers. I don't want to rip on anybody, but they were what they were. LSU punted fewer times than anybody else in the league. They punted 3 fewer times than Ole Miss, and Lane Kiffin is analytics guy, guru. He's going to go for it on 4th down a ton. So they had in 2023, they had 26 punts, and only 2 of them were returned for -1 yards. Okay, this didn't work out nearly as well, and they're going to have to be in the transfer portal for a punter.
Yeah, I mean, and we kind of knew that going into the season. Brian Kelly was not happy with the punters. He was flip-flopping, going back and forth on who he was going to start. It was an issue that they had in camp, and it was something that they were never able to figure out. And the guy that they really needed wasn't on the roster.
Yeah, so we got a lot right. We got some stuff wrong where this season went. It wasn't a disaster. It also wasn't what anybody was really shooting for, including Brian Kelly.
Yeah.
So it's an important. I would say the next 2 weeks are incredibly important. This week and next week, where the transfer portal is concerned, we hope by the time we do, we're going to keep kind of we're going to keep the podcast in limbo for next week was what day we're going to do it, because we'd like to be able to show you some film on some incoming guys. So that's what we're hoping to do next week. So just kind of monitor us to when we get going. So, hey, some of it right, some of it wrong, but I don't think there's nothing I looked back in on this whole thing and went, oh man, we had no basis for thinking that. No, the ones we missed, we had a basis for thinking. It just didn't quite get there.
Yeah, I mean, when you step back, and I know you watch us on post game, and I get very angry at every loss, and
it's okay.
I'm never going to be able to get rid of that. But the season ended kind of how we thought it was. I mean, you can throw different names out there, but I was 9 to 10 wins. We were hoping that 10 wins, 2 losses got you into the playoffs.
I would say that the games that probably disappointed me the most. The USC game, which I thought they were gaining control of in that fourth quarter, and let it slip away. And the Florida game that I thought they could have won that game.
Yeah.
They really could have won that game. The most surprising thing about the games that were different than how we set them up, I thought Oklahoma would be a lot better, and I didn't think A&M would be quite as good with the coaching change, but they were. And then the Ole Miss, so you say, well, they lost a couple of games that maybe they should have won, but I can't tell you that I thought they were the better team against Ole Miss, and they won that game.
Yeah.
So sometimes maybe it all balanced out. Would have liked to have seen one more.
They got their butts kicked one time.
Yeah, and that one's hard for me because how about this? I'll go take what we did in the pregame and the pre-show and the podcast from Alabama week, because it was the same thing about the 23 game and the 24 game. And we know Milroe's coming back now. There needs to be, when LSU goes to Tuscaloosa next year, 740 people in the box. And if Milroe throws it over your head, shake his hand, get on the bus, and come home. If you let him run for another 180 damn yards next year, shame on you.
Can't take it.
All right. We got one more podcast before the break. Again, it can be a little bit fluid next week. We'll see what happens in the transfer portal. For Richard Dixon, I'm Charles Hannigraph, and this has been the Hannycast.